All right, this past weekend, Ian Machado Garry stepped into the octagon in relatively short notice and put on what I believe up to this point is one of the most impressive performances to date. Now, the reason this fight was relatively short notice for Ian Garry and really for both guys is that Carlos Prates was originally scheduled to face off against the hard-hitting Jeff Neal, who I believe pulled out for reasons that are still somewhat unclear. I imagine it was an injury, but regardless, if you've seen any of Carlos Prates' recent performances in the octagon, the man is an absolute killer. Carlos Prates, who has been on the giving end of some emphatic victories as of late. The guy has some of the sharpest striking and pure Muay Thai that you'll see in the UFC today. And for a guy like Ian Garry, who, of course, Ian Garry, very good on the feet himself, a very capable kickboxer. But at the same time, Ian Garry is somebody who we've seen get a little irresponsible defensively and get seriously hurt in a fight because of it. So when you add all that up and you take into account the fact that Ian is yet again taking on a pretty risky fight with less than ideal time to prepare. And oh, by the way, coming on the back of his first ever professional loss. And again, another situation where he was coming in last minute. Look, I know that Ian Garry is the kind of guy that amongst a lot of UFC fans, he probably has just as much, if not more, haters than actual fans. But if you're a fan of this sport, you have to respect what the guy's doing. A guy with this much hype at this young of an age, taking these kinds of risks is pretty much unheard of. When you compare these kinds of fights that Ian Garry is taking on at his age to the likes of some other younger kind of on the come up fighters like your Sean O'Malley's and your Bo Nichols, if nothing else, you have to say that Ian Garry is a game fighter. And the guy went in there and put on a hell of a show. Against Prates, the dangerous striker, Ian Garry was able to command respect pretty much right away in this one on the feet. And honestly, this is kind of a hard fight to break down past that point because for the entire fight, it was just more of the same. Ian Garry being the sharper and at times more disciplined striker, knowing when to come in and explode and look for a power shot and when to just kind of lay off and pick Prates apart from distance. One thing to note is Ian Garry did have a lot of trouble getting to the ground in this fight, even though he was able to still get the victory. The guy attempted and ultimately failed at getting Carlos Prates down many times. And Ian even though he's now training and I believe full-time living in Brazil, he's got some good jiu-jitsu, but at the end of the day, he is by no means a wrestler. And I'm not going to lie, I think that vegan diet's probably not helping him too much either. But even though he failed at getting Prates down many times, he ultimately was successful. And Ian Garry is actually now the first and only guy to ever take Carlos Prates down. So ultimately, it's hard to come away from this one with really anything bad to say about Ian. I mean, he took a fight that, by all accounts, he probably didn't really need to take, performed well on the feet and ultimately on the ground. And although he was in a little bit of trouble late in this one, the guy was mostly just on cruise control for the 5 rounds. So while the big takeaway here is that Ian Garry is as advertised, he really is that good, I think for most people, we already knew that. And when you look at the broader title picture for the 170-pound division right now, I don't really know what this fight means. With the champion, Belal Muhammad, already set to fight Jack Della Maddalena, and with Sean Brady's recent, very impressive performance over Leon Edwards, even though Ian Garry has been fighting pretty actively and has been winning outside of the Shavkat fight, you still have to imagine that Sean Brady, with a big win over a former champion, is going to be ahead of him. And then also Shavkat, who has been supposed to fight for this belt for a very long time, who also just beat Ian Garry, would also be ahead of him. And then the tough thing here is that a lot of these guys, Sean Brady, Shavkat, they've made it very clear that they want their next fight to be for a title. And Ian Garry, a guy who likes to stay active, likes to stay busy, I don't really know what's next for him. I think at this point, he might just have to hold his spot in the queue, which probably means not fighting for upwards of a year. Now, Sean Brady, fellow Philly native, has made it very clear that he wants a title fight next and that he thinks it doesn't make any sense at all for Ian Garry to be calling for a title shot after a win over Carlos Prates, which makes sense. Carlos Prates, who was ranked in the top 15, was by no means in the picture to be fighting for a title if he won this fight. And with the queue for fighting for the belt being backed up, I do think a fight between Ian Garry and Sean Brady might make a lot of sense. Sean Brady was able to bounce back from his TKO loss to Belal Muhammad, proving that his grappling is serious. He was able to out-grapple Leon Edwards in a way that Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman were not able to do. Ian Garry, being another high-level striker who fancies himself a little bit of a jiu-jitsu practitioner himself, I think these guys have very different styles and would make for a very interesting fight. And while they're both kind of in that prospect phase of their career, and we all know the UFC doesn't like to put guys like that up against each other, I think it might make for a really good fight. And at the very least, a winner would be, without a doubt, next in line to fight for the belt, after the next two guys. But that's about it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How did you guys view this fight? Do you think Ian Garry proved anyone wrong, proved anyone right? And how many fights left, if any, do you think Ian Garry has before it's his time to fight for the gold? Thanks for watching.